Dr. Barker, and welcome back to Holding Space. We're going to talk today about phobias. And here's a trigger warning right up front that I may be mentioning some things that people have actual phobias of, or certainly some fears of. But we're going to talk about how phobias can be initiated and a little bit about treatment. The main focus right now is on behaviorism and the development of phobias. Phobias are irrational fears of things that are basically neutral, and they are an outgrowth of behaviorism and classical conditioning. Everybody's heard of Pavlov and his dogs. This was back in the early part of the 20th century. John B. Watson, who is considered the father of behaviorism, did an experiment that we'll talk about in a second that showed how phobias can be developed. I was looking at my web browser over the weekend and a news story popped up, and it was the top of the news stories. It was about a little girl in Tennessee who had developed a fear of John Wilkes Booth. John Wilkes Booth, how do you know this when you're 3 years old? Her family went for a tour of Ford's Theater, and they talked about what happened there. The parents initially said that, well, the president was hurt there, but it turned out to be a lot more than that, of course, and the presentation by the historians who run the theater certainly enumerated a lot more about it. She developed right away. Perhaps the presentation of the man with the mustache was frightening. We don't really know why, but she developed an irrational fear of John Wilkes Booth to the point of asking her parents all the time, is he coming to get me? Is he going to hurt me? Can you check under the bed and see if he's there? The boogeyman had a name for her. It was John Wilkes Booth. Let's go back to how this sort of thing can happen. It's purely an accidental association, but the more time she spent dwelling on it, the more, ingrained it became. That's probably a good word for it. Back to John B. Watson. In the early part of the 20th century, he had a psychology lab, one of the first, and was pioneering the work of behaviorism. He said that things that happen in our minds grow through stimulus and reinforcement. If a stimulus is reinforced, it will take hold and it will become part of our behavioral repertoire. If it is not reinforced, then it will fade away. Again, following on the work of Pavlov, who had conditioned dogs to salivate at the sound of a bell. I'm sure that everyone's heard of him. Watson said, well, let's try inducing a fear. Why? I do not know. This was the days before we had the type of ethical concerns that we do now. I don't think this would have been something that I would have attempted to do, but it certainly taught us a lot. They used a little boy that they called Little Albert, disguising his identity for the purpose of the study, 9 months old, brought him into their laboratory, and they had him see and play with a variety of objects. The mask, monkey, toys, all things that he had, and they even exposed him to a white rat in a cage. He had no reaction to any of these things, but for some reason they decided to use a white rat, and we have continued to use white rats for psychology experiments from that day forward. But they put little Albert on the floor in the lab, comfortable setting, brought in the white rat in the cage, put it down in front of him, and little Albert was like, oh, yeah. And then somebody came up behind him and hit a metal bar with a hammer and made a loud clanging noise, scaring him. Naturally, little Albert cried. They took away the rat and soothed him. Then, when he was calmed down again and just, sitting there playing normally like a 9-month-old, they brought back in the white rat, put it down again. Little Albert was like, oh, white rat. Clang and crying. And, of course, after repeating this a few times, I'm not really sure how many, but naturally, when they brought the rat back again, little Albert started to cry as soon as he saw it. Now, this was the conditioning of a phobia. If any of you have a fear with rats, I terribly sorry for having mentioned this. It actually is something that people are afraid of. And rats carry diseases. They've been associated with the bubonic plague and biting you and all sorts of rabies, all sorts of things. So there is a rational basis for wanting to avoid rats. But where it becomes irrational is if you will not go around areas where you think there might be rats or where you've heard about rats. New York City, for example, you might want to avoid if you have a fear of rats. They've had a rat control problem. The aftermath of the little Albert study was they didn't deprogram him or debrief him, as you can't really with a 9-month-old, but pretty soon little Albert's mother showed up at Watson's doorstep and it's like, look, you got to fix him, because not only is he afraid of anything related to white fur, like my white fur coat, he's also afraid of Santa Claus's beard, cotton balls. She rattled off a list of white things, and little Albert had become afraid of anything soft and white. And this is called generalization. And he had generalized his initial fear of the white rat to anything white and fluffy. This is how things can become fearful in a general kind of way. The number 13 holds fear for a lot of people. Sorry if I mentioned the number 13. Clowns are frightening for a number of people. I saw you shudder. Why? Not really sure. Bad experience. They do make a lot of noise. A lot of people laugh when they see them. They're wearing weird clothes and multicolored hair and things like that. There may be a rational reason for initially becoming afraid of a clown, but think about the implications. At first, we become afraid of one particular clown. Then it becomes sort of all clowns. Then it becomes Ronald McDonald. Then it becomes McDonald's. Then it becomes tents, acrobats, anything that you come to associate with a circus or anywhere that clowns might be. It can generalize to that extent. There was a case of a girl that I worked with. Her mother had seen that she was about to walk on the grass where they had just sprayed chemicals for fertilizers and pesticides. And her mother said, "Oh, don't walk on the grass. It could be dangerous." The little girl said, "Why?" She's 9 years old by the time she came to see me. Said, it's, there's chemicals on there that are bad for you. And so naturally she drew back from that, being a good, well-behaved child. Then she started thinking about it. And she realized that, okay, well, you never know just because there's a sign. Okay, that indicates that there's probably something on this grass. But most grass in general, and grass grows outside of a specific area. So she became afraid of all grass. Then that generalized to, well, what grows in the grass? Flowers. She became afraid of touching flowers. Trees. Trees grow in the grass. So she became afraid of touching trees. Pencils are made of wood, and wood is from trees. And so she became afraid of touching pencils. And then it soon generalized to pens, crayons, just about anything that was long and cylindrical that resembled a pencil. So by the time she came to me, there were a good number of things that she was afraid of, and her mother realized exactly where it came from, but it had gotten to this extent. And what we had to do was we had to work on it gradually. They use exposure therapy with people who have phobias. They will expose you gradually to the thing that you're afraid of. First via a picture, then maybe a video, a moving picture. Then they'll actually bring the item into the room. I don't know if they actually do that with clowns. Sorry again for mentioning clowns. But things that are successive approximations of the thing that you're afraid of, until eventually you get to hold the thing that you're afraid of until it doesn't hurt you and you realize that there's no fear anymore. And then it extinguishes. And this is what they refer to in behaviorism as extinguishing a fear or an association, extinguishing a reinforcer. It stops occurring, and therefore it stops being associated. So what we did with her was we started out with a pencil, and we had a pencil in the room, and I had some pencils on my desk, and then I gradually moved them a little closer to her, and she knew what was going on. We explained everything. Eventually, I gave her a pencil to hold when she felt like she was ready, and she took the pencil and clasped it tightly, kind of afraid to look at it. Her knuckles were turning white, and after a while, she was like, "Oh, okay, nothing happened. Oh, yeah, okay." And she was able to put the pencil down and everything was okay. And then we used the pen, we used the crayon, we used some of the other things. And I asked her at that point, I said, "Well, are you ready to touch your shoes?" Because she was afraid of her shoes too, because, well, shoes walk on grass. And she literally said, "No, let's not get crazy here." We gradually were able to extinguish the fear. Extinguishing fears in general is difficult, and one of the other things, and I'll make a brief digression here in behaviorism, schedules of reinforcement. The toughest schedule of reinforcement to extinguish is an intermittent level of reinforcement. Let's say you go to a soft drink machine every day, and you put in your money, and you get your drink, you have your lunch, everything's great. Then one day you go in, you put in your money, and push the button, nothing comes out. What do? Do you walk away? No, you push the button again. Push the button again. After a while, you give up and you walk away. Then the next day you figure, I'm going to give it a try. Maybe they fixed it. So you go over and you push the button and the soft drink comes out. Oh, great. Okay, good. Then that goes on okay for a while. And then the next day, again, you put your money in, nothing comes out. Then you walk away, but you're getting more angry, and you've probably pushed the button a few more times, and probably hit the return coin meter a few times. Nothing's happened. So after this has gone on for a while, so one day you get it, one day you don't. 3 days you will get your soft drink, one day you don't. Then 5 days in a row go by and nothing comes out, but you're still going and you're putting the money in. Why is that? Because you're hoping that this time will be the right time, and you don't know when that's going to be. People ask sometimes, why do people put up with people who are hurting them? Why do people put up with bad behavior from people, whether they're parents or whether they're partners or that sort of thing? You're hoping that this time they will be good. And against all odds, you hold on. And this is something that is very tough to break. It is probably the strongest reinforcement schedule there is. And again, when we talk about some more related to narcissistic personalities, this is the type of behavior that you'll see. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Why do you hold on? Because you hope it's good again. Think about relationships that you've been involved in with people who are sometimes good and sometimes not so good. What do? Do you just give up after the first time? No. You hold on. You try and work with it. You try and figure out. And eventually you hear, oh, it's your fault. And you start to think, well, maybe it is my fault. Maybe I should do things differently. And so you try doing things differently. And then you've changed, but the reinforcer hasn't changed, because that lies in another person. And they have control over that. And gradually, they gain control over you. This is all stuff that there's no easy answer for. And again, I think that I am a therapist, but I do think that therapy is the best addressing medium for this. Doing it on your own is difficult. Support groups are important. Therapy is important. And whether it's a white rat or whether it's a rat fink of a human being, getting past it is a complicated process. Don't give up. Keep trying. Hold space for yourself. And I'll have to leave you on that note, but I wish you a less fearful day.